Zambia, usually most of the journalists will remain in the country even after being arrested. We've not had many situations where journalists have ended up in jail to save some term of imprisonment. What has been happening is they will arrest you and you start going to court, but along the way it's like things just begin to lag behind. Like you don't get any court dates, new court dates for your appearance in court, for your matter to be heard. So what we see happening mostly is such things being used to try and stop you from doing your journalism. So again, the other problem is if you are arrested and you are charged with a criminal offense, then it becomes very difficult for you to leave the country because they'll get your passport as one of bail conditions so that you don't leave, yes. If they don't get your passport, they'll say that this person is a flight risk and they might get out anytime. So the court will keep your passport so that you don't travel anywhere. Practicing, yes, you can, but unfortunately, because of your experience, because of your arrest, you begin to be very cautious. So certain things get swept under the carpet because you are afraid. You wouldn't want to get arrested again and taken through the same process. And you start appearing in court over other offenses when there are also other offenses that are hanging over your head. So it's sort of one of those ways or measures which are mostly used by state institutions to try and stop journalists from being very critical of the state. And we have the Penal Code, for instance, that has got a lot of laws that unfortunately are anti-press freedom, and they're extremely prohibitive, especially when it comes to investigative reporting. So a journalist will be arrested, for instance, and charged with sedition or other provisions in the State Security Act because they will think you would have reported on something which is a state secret and should not be reported on. So all those are sort of measures that are being used to try and stifle press freedom, where they wouldn't want as many of the journalists reporting on critical issues that are happening in our country.
So when they get out or being prosecuted in every way, anyway, so to continue to be a journalist is not an option for them, or it is?
Well, for a number of them, really, it's something that they just continue to do because you trained to be a journalist, and the only thing you can do is to continue practicing as a journalist. But others do have other options where you find someone being afraid to continue to practice journalism, then they start looking for jobs as public relations officers, which unfortunately makes the oppressors extremely happy because they would have achieved their target, or they would have achieved their set objectives, because what they wouldn't want is to have a lot of journalists being so critical and reporting on those things that they wouldn't want reported on. So if somebody branches off and begins to practice public relations, then they'll be the happiest. But we have seen a number of them actually do that because they feel journalism is just too harsh and something that they wouldn't want to exist in anymore. And they feel the harassment is just basically not for them. So a few brave ones will stick in there and still begin to, to continue to push and practice journalism the way it should be. Yeah, so others have branched off to do something else away from the practice of journalism because of fear of arrests and other intimidation that comes with the work that we do. The other intimidation comes from political forces. So mostly it is like a ruling party that will be using the people within those parties to harass the journalists. Some of them even being violent against the journalists. Some of them actually even start up trivial cases against the journalists. So someone report a journalist to the police because they are not happy with them. And the police will move to arrest the journalist because the person that is telling them what to do is coming from a party that is in power. So they sort of abuse that incumbency to such an extent that they would even stop journalists from doing the work that they do. It's not a new thing. That's something that we have seen over the years, and it's been happening for many, many years. I think the worst we had seen is in the 1990s, when a number of journalists for a newspaper that I worked for would be arrested. Every other month there will be someone who's being arrested and taken to court. And the other worst point we ever reached is the closure of a newspaper simply because we were very critical in reporting and exposing what was going on behind the scenes just before the elections. So those are some of the risks that we face as journalists, where those that feel they have the power begin to abuse the laws that are there. Not that the laws are bad, the laws are very good, but the only thing they do is because they have the power, they tend to abuse the laws to their advantage to try and stop journalists from doing their jobs.
So, and what about world organizations like Committee for Protection Journalists, Reporters Without Borders? Can you ask them for some kind of help, and how can they help?
They've been helping through some advocacy work, for instance. Like if something happens, I know when the post was closed, they issued statements, they wrote letters to the sitting head of state at the time, and it's not a new thing, they do that in many other countries. But the biggest problem that we see in Africa is that when people have the power, they feel they have everything else. They feel they wouldn't listen to anybody else, because if a president of another country tries to even talk to them and tell them you don't need to do this, respect press freedom, and they don't listen, then what can an organization like Reporters Without Borders do? So they feel they have just too much power such that they can't even listen to anybody else. They feel what they're doing is the correct thing, yet it is away from what should be done. So yes, the work is being done. Most of those organizations do help in terms of advocacy and sometimes even support to individual journalists so that they can see them continuing to do independent journalism. But the biggest problem is the people that have the power, the state institutions. How protective are they to journalists? How willing are they to go to ensure that press freedom is respected? That's where the bigger problem is. And at the top of them all, the law enforcement agencies, like the police, they are among the worst violators of press freedom, unfortunately, for a country like mine. Because they will know that you're a journalist. You have a big camera where you are easily identified. You even have your ID and you tell them I'm a journalist. But unfortunately, they will always do something which is not expected from a law enforcer and somebody who should in fact be extremely protective to ensure that you do your job without any problem. Yeah.
You were arrested. You said that you were arrested.
I was arrested.
What was your treatment during that time?
Well, the treatment was okay. Of course, that time I recall very well that the people that were even affecting the arrest were clearly, for lack of a better term, they were laughing at the charges because there wasn't any defamation of the president that anybody would have talked about. But because they were given instructions to do it, they had to do it. So those are the sad realities where sometimes even the people that are taught to do something like that are actually very aware that there isn't anything at all. And as we speak, the matter went to court. We only appeared twice. That was 2016. To this day, we have not gone back to court and no one is saying anything. So we still have that matter hanging over our heads, but the courts have not made any pronouncement. Because what they need to do is they have to clear us. So we have to go back to court. So it's either an acquittal or, a nolle prosequi or something that will get us out of it. But they haven't done that. So those are some of the things that happen. So they will keep you in that state for a very long time, such that all you want to do is forget about certain stories because you don't want to get back to where you had been previously. Yeah.